All right. Well, hello and welcome to today's event. My name is Kelsey Bernard. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I am hosting today's live stream as a representative of the Cougar Conservancy. I'm happy to be joining you today during the P-22 Day Festival. Today, I am pleased to introduce our two speakers, wildlife biologist Miguel Ordeñana of the Natural History Museum of Los Angeles County and Karina Domingo, founder and director of the Cougar Conservancy, will be sharing their stories on how they got involved in mountain lion research. Miguel Ordeñana, who joined the museum in April 2013, is an environmental educator and wildlife biologist. Miguel discovered the now famous mountain lion P-22. As a community science manager, he promotes and creates community science projects and recruits and trains participants. Miguel utilizes his mammal research background by conducting urban mammal research in LA and co-leads the museum's Southern California Squirrel Survey. He holds a bachelor's degree in environmental studies from the University of Southern California and an MS in ecology from UC Davis. Karina Domingo is a wildlife biologist from Los Angeles, California. She has worked throughout the western United States to enhance human-cougar relationships through education, outreach, conflict management, and science policy. Karina founded the Cougar Conservancy on April 20th, 2020, after the legal killing of mountain lion P-56 caused a major uproar in the LA community. She works collaboratively with state and federal agencies, nonprofit organizations, and private partners to prevent, manage, and reduce human cougar conflicts. Karina was honored by California Senator Anthony Portantino in 2019 for her dedication in educating the community about living with mountain lions. During the same year, she co-led efforts to list southern and central coast mountain lions under the California Endangered Species Act. In 2020, these imperiled populations were granted temporary protected status. The format of today's event will include two 15-minute long presentations from each of our speakers, followed by an Ask Me Anything Q&A. So please type your questions into the comment field and we will answer them in the second half of our program. So without further ado, Miguel will be presenting first today. So take it away, Miguel.
Here we are. I'm going to talk about my career as a wildlife biologist. And what I'm going to focus on is kind of the more unique parts. Like a lot of people have overlapping moments in their pathways to a wildlife biology or conservation career. But I'm going to focus on my kind of unique parts so that people feel like that this type of career is attainable if you're interested in it, even if you don't have the same, like the perfect education, perfect career experience, it's still attainable if you're passionate about it. So to give you some perspective, kind of what influenced my career is that I started off and now back to living in LA. So I grew up in LA, and I was taught, like many other city kids, that nature did not exist in the city, and if you wanted to see nature, you'd have to go to the park. And even if you went to these urban parks, you really didn't know what to expect. There wasn't really much education about local nature, plants, animals, and so I didn't feel this really strong connection to nature. But I did love animals. And my family was very supportive of my passion for animals. Other than an aunt of mine that loves animals as well. I think I probably am the most passionate about animals by far is science, and I really didn't have any explanation for it, but my family and my mom included noticed that passion and wanted to support it. So I really want to acknowledge that privilege that I had that maybe a lot of other kids don't have, regardless of where they're coming from. And so I grew up right across the street from this park called Griffith Park, which is where the Hollywood sign is, Greek Theater, Hollywood, not Hollywood Bowl, but LA Zoo is. And it's a very popular park for recreation, hiking. I would go ride pony rides or the little miniature train, or have a barbecue with families, play catch with my mom. but really didn't go there to go explore and identify plants and animals, because that's just not something my family did. And I didn't really understand what animals were there, other than when animals from the park would go through my neighborhood, because I lived across the street from the park. Animals like coyotes, raccoons, possums would come through my neighborhood, and that would always spark my curiosity. And there would be interaction just like this. I'd be out going into to our home, and there'd be a coyote walking in front of our car, or something similar involving a skunk, or a skunk would spray our dog. And so seeing these animals in settings like that are so personal to me really helped me make that connection to nature accidentally. And the Natural History Museum was a great resource as well. My mom went to school and worked full time, but when she could, she would take me to the zoo or to the Natural History Museum. And she went to USC, and would take me to the Natural History Museum, which was right across the street from USC. The message I got there, like it's a natural history museum, at least when I was growing up, very similar to a lot of other natural history museums. You expect to see dinosaur bones, fossils, and diorama halls that are depicting really beautiful scenes. But really you didn't get the message of, hey, nature is also here in the middle of the city, and there are also cool animals here. The dioramas that I would see and experience in these mammal halls really would transport me to Africa or Yellowstone National Park if I was in the North American Mammal Hall, and told me that these animals are cool, they're worth conserving, but there's really not anything worth saving here in LA, and maybe wildlife conservation isn't a thing in cities. But fortunately, I had an opportunity, another one of those moments where I stumbled upon opportunity, like running into a coyote in my neighborhood. I found a poster while at USC, my senior year, and applied for a program to go study in Africa for 3.5 months and learn something called wildlife management, which I didn't even know what that was before I saw that poster. And so I got my feet wet in field research, learned about human wildlife conflict, mapped where wildlife were in comparison to human structures in this unprotected area between two national parks. So it's a great experience. And then also the professors were local Kenyans and really had some amazing, inspiring stories of coming from nothing and then becoming these really amazing biologists and professors. And so felt like they had a lot of adversity to get to where they are. And I'm kind of way behind as far as getting to this career compared to a lot of my colleagues that I was studying with. But I had a little hope because of that experience. I got back to LA and really scrambled to get experience, because that's what they told me. Like, you have to get experience to get your foot in the door here, to prove that you're worth being paid for doing field work and wildlife research. And so I interned for a while, studied desert tortoises. Then I got transferred to a project studying bobcats with the USGS in Irvine. So going from Africa, then to the Mojave Desert, and then all the way back to Orange County, which is not too far from where I grew up, learning that there's bobcats in Southern California. Part of that, which was embarrassing for me to admit at the time, was that I didn't even know what a bobcat was. I knew what lynx were, but I didn't know what a bobcat was. And then I started listening to the biologists, and they're like, "Do you also know that there's deer in Griffith Park?" No, I didn't know. My family didn't know there were deer in Griffith Park. I didn't know that bobcats potentially lived there as well. I just felt very disappointed that nobody told me these things, even though I grew up right across the street. Fast forward, I went to UC Davis to get a master's degree because that's what I was told I needed to do. I needed to get a graduate degree. So fortunately, I got enough experience under my belt to prove that I was worth being a graduate student to an advisor. And the advisor, very accommodating, and allowed me to focus on urban carnivore research. And I learned, before I went to Nicaragua, which is what you're seeing here, I learned how to use camera traps. And camera traps are motion activated cameras that allow you to document where wildlife, large mammals, elusive, mostly nocturnal mammals, are at night. And it allows you to kind of sometimes count animals. So if it's a jaguar like this, they have individually specific pelt markings that are like fingerprints. And so you can count how many jaguars literally, or count how many bobcats in certain areas, or at least can figure out what activity levels are. Then I wanted to make this work even more personal. So then I became employed by the U.S. Forest Service a few years later, and had an opportunity to come back to LA. And I was studying bats for the Forest Service in the Mojave Desert, just outside of the city of LA. And I had an opportunity to do another project on the side. And so I wanted to do a project in Griffith Park because it was an inspiring park for me. And based on what I had to learn in college and graduate school, I knew that actually this park was more important possibly than I thought or grew up knowing as a kid. And so I made a point to partner with some biologists with the USGS and Dan Cooper, who has his own consulting firm, and we created a camera trap project to look at whether or not Griffith Park was an island, and to see if these wide-ranging animals, large mammals, were able to get in and out of the park. And we not only proved that with this photo, these are deer crossing out of Griffith Park, but we also got the, the ultimate proof of connectivity, which is getting the most wide-ranging, sensitive large mammal in LA to come to Griffith Park somehow. And so this photo, which is just a puma butt, to a lot of people, was like seeing Bigfoot or La Chupacabra for the very first time, because it was like this mythical creature all of a sudden appearing on your computer screen that you're used to seeing rabbits and deer and common animals like that. And all of a sudden this animal that's been unconfirmed, but has this legendary status of being present by submissions of people's dog photos or cat photos, insisting that they're mountain lions. Now we had ultimate proof that mountain lion did make it into the park, and this park that I grew up going to, which made it even more personal and amazing. But we didn't know where it came from. And so the Park Service came out, they tagged the individual, put a GPS collar around his neck, just like this one here, and so they can track his movements. But also they took blood samples to match his DNA with other mountain lions they had previously studied. And they gave him the name P-22, which means that he was the 22nd puma ever studied. And his dad was P1, the very first puma that was part of their study. And his dad lived west of the 405 and lived his whole life there. And so that meant that P-22 had to have been born west of the 405, because the mom would have probably been within the father's range, even though it was an unknown female. And so P-22, to make it to Griffith Park and escape his territorial dad or other large males in that area, he had to cross the 405, then go through Bel Air, Beverly Hills, Studio City, then cross the 101 freeway, another 10-lane freeway, to get into Griffith Park. And that journey in itself made him legendary, but also this photo and the fact that he stayed there and didn't have any conflict with people, and to this day, knock on wood, he hasn't really had any issues with people. He killed a koala, unfortunately, and got stuck under somebody's house for a while. But other than that, he's kept to himself. And so as long as we kind of continue to give them their space, he's shown that it's even possible to coexist with one of the most controversial animals out here in LA, the mountain lion. And now this museum that I grew up going to and being inspired in a totally different way about wildlife through this museum, now there's an exhibit dedicated to P-22 that's not only inspiring kids about wildlife, but it's also letting them know that there is really remarkable species and populations right here under our nose here in LA that are worth conserving and worth celebrating. And they do scavenger hunts in the exhibit. They had now there's just groups and groups of students that are just advocates. And I could never imagine kind of having this knowledge at their age, and I'm really grateful that they do. And to even add to this, I gotta say, some of the most rewarding experiences that have come out of this is sharing my knowledge with the next generation. And here's just an example. Her name is Rachel Ann Arias, and she was part of our Nature Navigator program. And this is now I'm at the Natural History Museum working there. And she has been really inspiring because she was this very quiet preteen that was just part of our weekend free programming that like allowed these kids to learn about nature and community science. And I was a guest speaker one day and I introduced the kids to camera traps. And I was hoping that, yeah, they learn about P-22 and how I do research, but I thought that was kind of the end, but it wasn't. Little did I know she'd become really interested in camera traps. I think she's 9 years old or so at this time, and asked for one for her birthday, got one from her grandparents, started monitoring local parks, created a local field guide based on her camera trap photos. Then got more mentorship from people like Joanna Turner, who runs Cougar Magic, learned how to be a tracker in addition to use camera traps. And now she's a teenager, almost done with high school, and she's keeping it up and sharing what she learns about wildlife with her camera traps to others, and is now not only an expert in camera traps, but probably even better than me at camera trapping, as you can see in this photo to the right. And hopefully an inspiration for the next generation, and so that there's more people that look like us in these career paths. It's also a family affair. That's one of the most rewarding parts as well, is getting my family, my daughter, hopefully someday my son, who's on the left corner there on the bottom, and now my brothers, who started off probably when they're 5 or 6, coming along with me studying camera traps. Now they're about to graduate high school and they're still doing it and supporting me. And so this is how we do it. We lead by example. We create an easier path for the next generation, and we go out of our way to do it because as people who had difficulty getting to where we are, we understand the value of creating an easier path and seeing somebody that's relatable to you in the career that you aspire to pursue. So I promised, these are the latest photos of P-22. He is an ambassador for wildlife still to this day. He isn't as spry as he used to be, but he still looks strong, healthy, and is successfully hunting deer in the park. And yeah, still inspiring people. This is the 5th year of the P-22 festival, and he's still as beloved as he was the first year. And quickly, I'll say that he's inspired me to be a more engaging scientist, studying diurnal species that are more accessible, like squirrels, and using crowdsourced photos to map where their distribution really is, not just relying on what scientists find in parks. And getting photos of where the eastern fox squirrel is, a more urban, adapted, introduced species, and compare that to the native gray squirrel, and to show that the gray squirrel is really basically disappearing from LA right under our noses, and we need to do something about it. But the only way to prove it is to get the community's help to confirm that the eastern fox squirrel and the western gray squirrel are in the situations that they're in. And there's a group of children helping us out, documenting squirrels at Expo Park in South LA. And bats are another project inspired by P-22 and that discovery, because I would never thought of studying bats in the middle of the city. If I could find a mountain lion in the middle of the city, I thought, hey, I have some experience studying bats using acoustic monitoring equipment. They can fly. They're not as vulnerable to freeways, so they're probably more adapted to the city than we thought. And so we study them using species-specific calls. Here's a Mexican free-tailed bat. Here's a California myotis. that's more adapted to rivers like the LA River. So showing the value of even urban structures like reservoirs and channels like the LA River to a wide variety of species. But let's say you want to go beyond the LA River, deeper within the city, then that's where community science comes in. And the Backyard Bat Survey, with the generous funding from the Disney Conservation Fund, has allowed us to partner with families to answer questions about what bats are in certain neighborhoods, and also along the way, allow these families have access to nature that they didn't know existed within their neighborhoods, and hopefully become advocates for them. So here's a group of family that helped us out by letting me install equipment. And here's a 12 species of bats that we're able to discover. We didn't even know if we detect more than one, and we didn't think we'd get them in every neighborhood we looked at, but over 40 locations we've sampled, and now up to 60, we've detected bats in every single location, no matter what neighborhood, from the most urban parts of South LA to the most suburban parts of LA County. So it's pretty inspiring to see how adaptable, and not only are there adaptable species that we already kind of expected to be around, but species of special concern in the state of California are also being detected, and species that were thought to only be in Northern California or in Orange County have been detected thanks to these families. And I'll leave with this is, I mean, I share this story a lot because it really shares what direction, I mean, what's the possibilities for the future. And this is me at a football game. I went to USC, so I've been a fan ever since, and even before that. And I was at a football game with my family, and my brother said, "Hey, Miguel, there's bats flying around the stadium lights, and they're eating moths." And I was like, "Whoa, really?" And of course, because I'm a bat nerd, I had a bat detector in my pocket. And I'm such a nerd that I'm sitting here indoors. I still have a bat detector with me. And I plugged it in immediately and was able to record bats that are flying overhead. I didn't care that I was blocking people's view, because I was just so into figuring out what bats were so adaptable that they were flying around during the middle of a football game with thousands of people in the stands. And that's inspiring to me because it shows me that this is the possible future as this technology gets cheaper, more accessible, and more people are aware that bats are out there, or nature is literally everywhere, including a football stadium. Maybe at halftime, a whole stadium full of people will be standing up listening for bats because they're going to expect them to be there. They're going to appreciate them as these insect-eating predators of the night sky. And I think that's the future that I want for LA and all cities, to everybody feel like they have nature everywhere in their neighborhoods, and that nature is truly accessible and nature is truly for everyone. So yeah, thanks. And I'll switch it over to Corinna.
Wow, thank you so much, Miguel, for sharing your story with us. For those tuning into the program, please type your questions into the comment field and we will answer them after Karina's presentation. So whenever you are ready, Karina, go ahead and take it away for us.
Awesome, thank you. What a great presentation, Miguel. I know I've seen a lot of yours, but I learn something new every time. So thanks so much for sharing that with us. I think my favorite part is you with the bat detector at the game. Like, to me, that's so wonderful. Well, hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us. My name is Karina Domingo, and I'm the founder and director of the Cougar Conservancy. And I'm happy to be here speaking with you about my pathway to mountain lion conservation. But before we get too deep into kind of my story, I think I'd like to set the stage, since we have people tuning in from all over for the P-22 festival. It's global this year. To take the time and talk about the current legal status of cougars in California. So cougars are currently classified as a specially protected mammal statewide. And last year, select subpopulations of cougars were petitioned to be listed under the California Endangered Species Act, also known as CISA. And although cougars are not hunted in California, they still face a wide array of different challenges. The causes of mortality for cougars include depredation, as you see on the top of the list here, or when a cougar damages property. And in California, property can be defined as a chicken or a goat or someone's domestic house cat or dog. And over the last 19 years, an average of about 196 permits were issued each year for cougars, and an average of about 93 cougars have been legally killed on depredation permits per year across the state of California. And so the vast majority of these permits occur in non-commercial settings. So these are conflicts happening in our own backyards. And so we kill about 100 on depredation every year, and then we kill about another 100 lions due to road strikes each year as well. Environmental toxicants are also a cause for mortality for California's cougars. And so currently now we know that cougars are being exposed to what are called anticoagulant rodenticides at alarming rates in California. That exposure can result in mortality, and that population level impacts are currently unknown. But what's interesting is that in an ongoing health and monitoring program led by the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, scientists have found that over 95% of cougars tested in California have been exposed to ARs, with 70% of those lions having about 3 or more ARs in their system. There's also new evidence to suggest that these ARs, or again, anticoagulant rodenticides, are reaching wildlife before they're even born. And so researchers at the department recently detected ARs in mountain lion fetuses, which is new news, and a phenomenon, this was previously only detected in Southern California bobcats. And so if you follow Los Angeles news, you also know that 5 mountain lions that are being tracked as part of the Santa Monica Mountains National Park Service study have died as a direct result of rodenticide exposure. Poaching obviously is also a cause of mortality for California lions, although the numbers on that are not as good as you can imagine. And orphaning can occur due to any one of the things that we just discussed. And also not explicitly stated here, but on our mind a lot more lately, are deaths due to wildfires. And so this is an emerging threat that we also should consider when we talk about California lions. And so, now that we have a brief understanding of just the general status of cougars and kind of some of the threats that they face in California, I'd like to share with you how I personally got involved in mountain lion conservation, and then we can share what we've been up to towards the end of the presentation. And so what really propelled me in the human-wildlife conflict world, or on the flip side, human-wildlife coexistence, is when I first got involved with the first ever P-22 Day Festival in Griffith Park the first year. And during that festival, I met my future boss, Lynn Collins. At the time, she was the executive director of the Mountain Lion Foundation. And so after that, networking and stuff at the festival, I got involved with the Mountain Lion Foundation. And my first ever encounter kind of with these complicated issues was when P-45, a local mountain lion in the Santa Monica Mountains, killed a resident's alpacas. And this story really was a high profile case. The story went worldwide because a local resident, her name is Victoria, she had taken out a depredation permit on P-45 after he killed quite a few of her alpacas. And so the community was not happy about this. And it was this, really interesting case of human wildlife conflict here locally in Southern California. Residents came out from all over in the local area to advocate for P-45 not being killed because he was a unique cougar in the area. Our local mountain lions, the inbreeding depression is definitely a concern. And so he was actually from north of the 101 freeway, and he would have brought in new alleles by making babies with the local female cougars. And so he wasn't just kind of any lion. And that was kind of the argument for, coexisting with him. And so, this case really taught me a lot about what it's like to work with the community. And so we went out and we built an enclosure, multiple enclosures for Victoria for her remaining animals, and the National Wildlife Federation actually paid for those pens. But really what I learned was how to create relationships with people during these high conflict scenarios. And so Victoria and I have worked together on that and for months afterwards. And we really forged a relationship based on trust and mutual respect, despite us maybe having different worldviews. And then after P-45, I worked on another case with mountain lion P-38, again, another local mountain lion in the Southern California area. And he was poached in June of 2019. And this really hurt the community. There was a lot of people who were very angry about this lion being taken illegally by a resident. And I reached out to the campus where this happened on. It happened on the American Jewish University campus. And despite this being a horrible scenario where we lost one of our local cats, I saw this as an opportunity to also try and reach across the aisle and figure out and identify areas that American Jewish University kind of maybe lacked resources, lacked the policy understanding, and lacked just the general awareness of how do they protect their animals on their property. And so I went there and we did an entire, assessment of their huge campus. And we talked about ways that they could fortify their structures and reduce the likelihood of having interactions with negative interactions with cougars on their property. And so that was another high profile case that I worked on. And I learned a lot through that work as well, again, about how to reach out to communities and find ways to work together and provide solutions and tools for coexistence. And then, last but not least, my last story on how I got into this work was most recently, when mountain lion P-56, this is him with the photo courtesy of National Park Service. He's being captured there to be collared. He was recently killed on a depredation permit in February of this year. And I'd actually just transferred positions from Mountain Lion Foundation to a new position when I heard about this news. And I was really disappointed because I had previously worked on a case mitigating a conflict with this animal, with P-56 in previous years, where I went out to the resident's house and helped them figure out ways to protect their remaining animals. And in that case, they agreed not to kill him on a permit. And so that was a conservation success. We had saved him that time, but unfortunately I wasn't involved in the case that, in February that resulted in his eventual death. But it really made me upset that that this happened. He was, again, one of only few collared males in this area, and his loss was significant. And so it wasn't enough for me to just be mad about this, which I definitely was. I was very upset, but I decided that I needed to take a hard look at the underserved need in the Los Angeles area to mitigate conflicts with cougars in general, but especially more in these small and genetically isolated populations in the Santa Monicas. There was really a need to give sound advice to residents. And, I just said to myself, I was no longer okay with this norm that it was okay to kill a mountain lion simply for killing a goat or a chicken. And so it wasn't just enough to be mad about this. I had to create a resource. And so I filed for nonprofit status right after this event happened, because there was no community-based organizations working in this area that specialized in responding to and reducing human wildlife conflict. And so I really sought to change that. And I tell the story and these three stories not to be sad and kind of look at this in the negative perspective, but I really think that this is a great example of how someone can identify an underserved need in their community and work to bring about change. So with that, the Cougar Conservancy's mission is to reduce human wildlife conflict and conserve cougar populations through science-based management and conservation. And I want to tell you guys about some good news that's happened this year. It's been a good good year for mountain lions in California in general. Prior to founding the Cougar Conservancy, I co-led efforts to list southern and central coast mountain lions under the California Endangered Species Act. And in April of this year, the month that I actually got my nonprofit status approved, these select subpopulations were granted candidate species, really in a historic moment. And so researchers have recently identified 10 genetically distinct subpopulations in the state of California, which you see here on the map represented in different colors. And the populations underneath that black line are the populations in the proposed ESU. And those are the populations that you see here on the bullet points that now have special protections. The vote comes up next year, summer of 2021, on whether or not they will indeed be listed under the State Endangered Species Act. So be sure to follow us on our website for opportunities to get engaged in some of the upcoming policy initiatives. Another win for wildlife was Assembly Bill 1788, also known as the California Ecosystems Protection Act. It was just signed by the governor. And what this does is it places a statewide moratorium or a temporary ban on second generation anticoagulant rodenticides, also known as cigars, in the state of California. So that'll go into an effect in 2021. And I know this is a hard picture to look at, but this is a local mountain lion, P-30, again, part of the Santa Monica National Park Service study, that died as a direct result to rodenticide poisoning. And so you can follow along on solutions on using the hashtag Break the Poison Chain to learn more about that. But I do want to end on a positive note. So our conflict task force at the Cougar Conservancy works on the ground to intervene and directly assist and empower local communities through training and education, both before and after human-wildlife conflicts occur. And so most recently, our task force worked on a case regarding a cougar just outside of Los Angeles. It's in the Monrovia area in the San Gabriel Mountains. And we responded to a resident who contacted us regarding a cougar that was likely burned from the wildfires, specifically the Bobcat fire. And he sent us these photos of her during the nighttime. So upon arriving at the site on the next day, we went there to do a home walkthrough and assess the situation. And while we did a walkthrough, we did indeed spot her on the side of the mountain, and she did seem to be injured. And so CDFW, the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, we coordinated with them, and they arrived shortly after, and we located the cat and worked as a team to safely chemically immobilize her. The department immobilized her, and we determined that she definitely was injured, and all four paws were badly burned and bleeding. And so she was immediately taken in for treatment. And this is UC Davis veterinarian Dr. Peyton doing a suite of different burn treatments on her. And so she's really been in the best hands. She's been receiving a suite of different burn treatments from the veterinarians, and she's eating well, and she's responding positively to treatment, and she's going to be released soon. So she is a candidate for release. She is going back into the wild. And so these are the veterinarians putting on tilapia skins, which help to soothe the pain and help the process of healing. And so this is a newer technique that they've been trying on the burn victims that they've been getting in, which has been a few black bears recently as well, some foxes, some coyotes. And so with the increase in human-caused wildfires throughout the state of California, we do anticipate having more of these cases in the future, but we just want to highlight that this is, you know, this was an opportunity. This was a good conservation success story. We were able to help this lion, and despite it probably being a pretty significant and stressful moment in this cougar's life, I do hope that she's going to be able to live out, you know, at least a few more years in the wild as a happy mountain lion. The veterinarians did say that her burns were about 1 to 2 weeks old. And so We are pretty confident that she probably wouldn't have been able to capture her natural prey source, which is deer. And so this is definitely an example of how our impacts, like human-caused wildfires, can impact mountain lions, and how conflict can potentially occur if she continued to, hang around the backyard. Thankfully, Gary is incredible, and he wasn't, too concerned about having her there. He was more concerned with her getting the help that she needed. So a lot of accolades to the resident who made this happen, really. And so because it's P-22 Day, I just want to bring it back to why we're here. And that's really to talk about P-22 and urban wildlife, and specifically the Liberty Canyon crossing. And so in Southern California, public and private partners are leading to build a campaign to build the world's largest wildlife overpass. And here is a beautiful rendering of what it'll look like. And so the Cougar Conservancy, how we are helping within this campaign is we're working in partnership with the Save LA Cougars campaign by providing educational opportunities to the public. We're outreaching to communities who are living on both sides of the proposed 101 wildlife crossing, and really just promoting coexistence strategies. And so, please join us if you haven't yet. The festival is up, and you can register at p22wonderland.org, log in, and there are so many awesome things to discover there. Lots of films and different vendor booths. And so all of that content will be up even after today, so you can go and explore there because there's been a lot going on today. So I'm sure we haven't been able to catch everything all at once. But with that, I will stop sharing my screen, and I think that we got some great questions in.
All right, thanks, Karina. That's always awesome to hear about these awesome stories. California mountain lions and wildlife are certainly lucky to have you guys. But let's move on to our Ask Me Anything portion. Some people submit questions beforehand as well, so I have some of those prepared. Let's see, we'll start with, how close are we getting to a freeway crossing, and what impact will it have on P-22 and his friends?
Do you want to take this one, Miguel? I know it's a lot of similar questions, I'm sure, that people have.
Go for it, Karina.
Okay. So the crossing, the area that this crossing is going over is not where P-22 is, right? So P-22 is in Griffith Park, and this crossing is more west of where he's at. And so while it won't help P-22 specifically, it's going to connect two areas that really need it. Other wildlife that are in these areas will be able to go back and forth. Feel free to add anything to that, Miguel.
No, yeah, that was good. It also depends what you think his friends are. I guess if they're in Griffith Park, no, but like if you're talking about mountain lions of LA are his friends, yes, I think the bridge is gonna not necessarily help him out, like Karina said, but is gonna save our population from extinction, which is estimated to go extinct within 50 years if connectivity isn't improved in that specific area. So yeah, that's unfortunately the case. P-22 is going to be a bachelor for life, but but he's an amazing and important ambassador for a cause that is going to save the rest of his population, which is amazing.
So that kind of actually leads into another interesting question that was on here. They said, since P-22 is getting older and he most likely won't find a mate in his lifetime, have biologists talked about saving his genetic material to artificially inseminate a female lion in the region so a spirit can live on?
So I think we answered this question on the Instagram Live earlier today. So check out the Instagram Live on that. But do you want to go ahead and try and answer that like really quickly, Miguel?
Sure, yeah, I'll do it once again. Yeah, I mean it's he's a good-looking mountain lion, but we don't truly know his genetic value other than P1 was his dad. We don't know they weren't able to figure out who his mother was, but this idea of saving genetics, kind of like a zoo kind of situations, preparing for the future, may have to be one of those strategies, like moving in other mountain lions to save the population and give the gene pool a kickstart. But we hope we don't have to get to that. Hopefully we can build this bridge and prevent us from needing to do that. But it's a good question. I mean, we'll see what happens in the future, because they need our help, and if it will have to do whatever it takes.
Okay, so we did get a few bat questions, so I thought I would throw one in here. How does the bat tracker or the acoustic?
Yeah.
How does that work?
Yeah, so it's called an Echometer Touch, and this is an old model, but it basically plugs into the lightning port of your phone if you have an iPhone. It also, there's a version for Android phones as well. And so it's an ultrasonic microphone, and bats call using ultrasonic pulses, which are basically high-pitched calls that are so high-pitched that we can't hear it. That's what ultrasonic means. So you plug this into your phone, and it is able to record all that sound, and you can create a window, a threshold of frequency, so that you can block out certain frequencies of sound and focus on just certain bats that are really high pitched, or make it a big range. Anyways, it feeds into an app on your phone. That's a free app that basically uses like a library of vocalization calls to identify what species just called right above you. So it's a really cool technology that gives you immediate gratification, because you immediately get an estimate of what species was flying overhead. And yeah, it's really cool that each bat species has a very unique call. It makes it possible for us to study them, because otherwise it's really hard, because they're very small, at least here in LA. They come out at night and they fly up high up in the air, and their calls are ultrasonic, so you can't really hear them either. So without special technology like this, it'd be very difficult to really get an understanding of what bats are even here. And when I do our backyard bat study has revealed like that most of my residents, even like I'm telling them they volunteered for the study, some of them are pessimistic that we're going to find bats. And we found bats in every single neighborhood, or home, or residence that we've looked at. So we're surprising ourselves and residents. But what's important is that we're making these discoveries together. And as more people use these little devices and have access to them, it'll just be a wider effort, and we'll just know way more about bats, which are amazing species.
Technology is getting pretty cool these days, that's for sure. Let's see. How do I get field experience in Los Angeles while maintaining a full-time job? I don't know who would want to take that one.
I can take a swing at it. I'm sure we're both going to have our own opinions on this one as well. So I'll be really honest with you. You know, this was definitely a barrier for me, because I am an LA native. And so when I was at community college, I was going to Santa Monica College at the time. It was very difficult for me to try and get involved with field research. I found it particularly a barrier because a lot of, at least in my experience, I found that a lot of people, students go to wildlife programs in other states, they get their degrees, and they tend to like come back home. I mean, I don't know if that's like an actual statistic, but I found that a lot of people already had degrees that were applying to these internships. And I found it kind of hard to be competitive. So I applied to a lot of things, and there's just so many people that want to get involved in the field that for me, it was very difficult. So I started my own project through Santa Monica College, and I crowdfunded my money for trail cameras, and that's a story for another time. But what I'll say is that there are opportunities to get involved, say in the museum too. So, you know, when the museum does have volunteers back again, I know that the pandemic has changed a lot of the way that the museum works. Getting connected with your local natural history museum, whether you live in LA or somewhere else, there are researchers that do field work. And if you introduce yourself to them and maybe come on as a volunteer, that may be a good way to get some experience doing surveys and stuff like that. And really researching local nonprofits is also what I did in school as well, is like know what nonprofits are doing things in your area and, you know, shoot them an email and try to get involved.
Yeah, I mean, I think this barrier goes beyond cities or in LA, but the barrier of having a volunteer, I think that's the biggest barrier. And I think museums, nonprofits, state agencies, federal agencies need to do a better job at making these experiential learning opportunities more accessible for people that can't afford to just drop what they're doing and work for nothing. And so I had the fortune of being able to do internships, and I was given housing through those internships. But I mean, it wasn't easy. And then even your first few jobs, I can speak for working for the federal government. They're very low paying, and you really have to count on them like offering you housing to make them realistic, or you have to be working close to home so you can live at home. And so those are real barriers. And I think, yeah, these nonprofits and federal agencies need to step up and make this type of experience more accessible to a wider audience. But I will say, since Corinna has gone through school, the Park Service is starting to offer more opportunities for people of different backgrounds, different experience levels. So that's a good thing. And yeah, but we can do a lot better of providing those opportunities. But yeah, like Karina said, just look into opportunities that fit your schedule. Maybe some opportunities are on the weekends, some are during the weekdays. So hopefully something like that could work for you. Yeah.
Awesome. Those are great, even for myself. Last question.
Repeat that. Sorry, I couldn't hear that.
Yeah, sorry. The question was, how can I support Cougar Conservancy?
Yeah, so you can support us a few different ways. You can just follow our work, you know, like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, spread the word of, you know, coexistence. We post a lot of videos and informational, you know, carousels and graphics, and really getting that information out there to people who are not, you know, entrenched in doing wildlife conservation. I mean, we need to reach people, all types of people. And during the pandemic, it's really an opportunity to do that online. So we're gearing up on a lot of visual content that you can share with family and friends and neighbors. And then just follow us at cougarconservancy.org. Obviously, you can financially donate, but we also post opportunities for the public to get involved with, like, you know, support for us can, and for mountain lions could look like you writing a letter in support of, say, a local policy that's going to benefit mountain lions and other wildlife, or writing in a letter or testifying at an upcoming commission meeting in your area for the listing, to list them under the California Endangered Species Act. So there's so many ways for you to advocate and get involved. And it doesn't just always have to be just donating or volunteering. So visit us online. And again, you know, SaveLACougars.org as well. If you want to, you know, donate to the crossing and be a volunteer with the National Wildlife Federation as well, that's definitely an opportunity for next year. Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, well, I think we're out of time, right?
Yes, we started a little late, but I think we got through it.
Yeah, no, that was awesome. Thank you guys for all the information and inspiration.
Thank you
Great.
for having us, Kelsey. We appreciate it. And if you guys have any questions, you can still pop them in the comments box and we'll try to go through and answer them once we're offline as well.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.